Hey, welcome to the SB. My name is Tim Shiel. I want to start by acknowledging the Yalukit Weelam clan of the Boon Wurrung, which is part of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge elders past and present, and I think before starting conversations like this, it's always good to take a moment and think about the fact that people have been sharing stories, making music, coming together for thousands of years on this land, and we are merely the most recent people to have these conversations. These conversations around music and life and art have been taking place for thousands of years, and we're just the latest to be getting into it. I'm really excited to be getting into it today. This is the APRA AMCOS Songwriters Speaks session. It's a place where artists can unpack their songwriting craft, and we can learn from one another about what we do when we are trying to tell a story and express ourselves and our feelings and our ideas. So I am absolutely stoked to welcome my two guests, lovely friends and amazing artists who I will introduce very briefly. Skye, incredible songwriter, originally from Horsham, currently based in Melbourne, put out this wonderful record a few years ago and then has spent the last couple of years working on a new album with Cloher, who is also here. Jen, hello, Jen. Well, let's say hello. Can we say hello? Hello, while I'm in the middle of my rambling intro. Cloher, for anyone who is somehow not aware, one of Australia's finest songwriters. Is that embarrassing if I say that?
No, I'll take that. It's proud.
Probably better me saying it than if it comes from you.
Just
it feels a bit weird.
There's a Paul Kelly mural just on the wall around here. Just whack my head on it.
Up the back. Jen put out an incredible self-titled record a few years ago, your fourth album, I think.
Yeah.
And then the Dyson Stringer Cloher record in 2019, but this history of incredible songs and self-expression. When I learned that the two of you were working together on Alice's new record, it just seemed like such a perfect fit because you have, I think, a lot in common in the way you approach the stories you tell and the songs you write, and a lot of that, I think, is about are willing to be vulnerable and express yourselves and to have that bravery, that courage to just get into your feelings. So we may get into some of those feelings today.
Look out.
And I love that we've gotten rid of the audience. Finally, at these panels, we've gotten rid of the crowd. It's just us and we can just hang. I want to say too, if anyone sees me looking at my phone, I'm not checking my Twitter.
No.
Unless you think I should. Okay, so I want to start, because we can go all over the place today, but I think I love to start at the start because I think some of the first moments you have with music, the relationship you have with music as a little kid stays with you, and I think can inform a lot of what you end up doing as an artist and as a human being, obviously. So Alice, I wanted to maybe start by going back to your childhood, earliest years, even 3, 4, 5, in the home or when you started school. What was music for you? What was your relationship with it? What were you listening to in the house? That kind of stuff.
I think I was pretty lucky. I'm the youngest and my siblings are 6 and 7 years older than me and were really into music. So I kind of always had it in my sphere. My sister played piano, so I became really obsessed with piano-led music, like Missy Higgins, also because she released Sound of White when I was 5. So it was formative years. And Regina Spektor or Joan Armatrading would play in the house. So I just became obsessed with playing piano and singing pretty young and started getting lessons around 5 and 6.
Okay. So what's a piano lesson like if you're 5 years old? What are your memories of that?
I loved it, but I was never good at the okay, go home and practice this now. I just wanted to play what I wanted to play.
Yeah.
But I don't know, you learn all the classics like Heart and Soul or something. Can't remember the other ones.
Yeah.
But I loved it. It was a reason to get out of school. I got to miss school and go to piano lessons instead, and I thought that was pretty great.
And so even when you were that young, if you were at home, maybe you were meant to be practicing, even that young, did you find yourself sort of exploring with your fingers a little bit around, trying to do something else? Because this is one of the things that sometimes surprises me. There's a lot of people who learn music, they don't ever try that. They don't ever try kind of maybe like colouring in outside the lines and seeing what it feels like and sounds like. Do you have memories of doing that as a little kid?
Maybe not that young, but sort of because I stayed in lessons from about 5 till 17, so I played it for a long time. But I wasn't very good at the like AMEB exams and stuff like that. And then I started just kind of, trying to make up things and play around with it. And I just loved being on the piano. I tried being on guitar, but I just couldn't do it. I still try.
What about you, Jen? Like when you were 5, were you playing music at all or listening to music around the house at that young?
My sort of first musical obsession, and it was an obsession, was Peter and the Wolf. My parents bought it for me on vinyl. I love how it's like, when I was 5, Missy Higgins put out The Sound of White. And I'm like, my parents bought Peter and the Wolf on vinyl for me, a deep 70s cut. And I would sit on in the lounge room on this chair right in front of the record player and listen to it from start to finish. And if there's many different versions of it. There's one by David Bowie, actually, that I didn't hear until later, like narrated by David Bowie.
Right.
I think there was this kind of fascination with, first of all, it was a really dark story, and I think like I was really scared of what was happening. But also I think it was the storytelling and using music and personifying, all of these different characters with different musical instruments. So I guess it was like a way of teaching children about how an orchestra is put together, because at the end it all plays. I was just fascinated by it. And it's such a, I didn't go on to play I didn't have any classical training or become obsessed with the viola or anything, but I think that was where that connection happened, where it was like, you can tell stories using music. Mm. And I think that's really all I've ever done since then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that leads me to, for both of you, like the moment where you do decide, well, I'm actually going to have a go at this and I'm going to try and write some music, which I think for a lot of people does happen in their teenage years, where they just have a moment where they go, maybe I can actually write a song about how I'm feeling or what happened to me today. Or maybe Jen, I'll start with you. Like, did you have a moment at some point where you kind of went, I'm going to do this, I'm going to give it a crack?
Yeah.
What was your first song about?
Yeah, well, I think the first sort of song that really I took seriously, like I felt like I'd written a lot of songs and I put out an EP in Sydney, I think it was in 2000 or 2001, that never had it was just like grassroots. It never had a release through a label or anything, but I just made this sort of recording. And there was a song on there called The Longing Song. And I think that was the first song that I'd written where I was like proud of it, where I was like, this is good enough to kind of go out into the world. And that actually ended up on my sort of debut album a few years later. I think like the moment really for me where it clicked into something that I was going to do was when I moved to Melbourne, which was at the end of 2001. And I just made the decision to make an album. I was like, I'm going to write a record and I'm going to record it and I'm going to put a band together. And I didn't know anyone in Melbourne. I'd come from an acting background. I'd been through NIDA and sort of done various plays and performances in Sydney. It was really moving to this kind of mythical musical city that started that sort of more serious kind of idea of making music something that I did. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned you went through NIDA and went on to have a critically acclaimed acting career, as we all know, Jane Cloher.
Alice is laughing because I'm always like the NIDA spider.
Yeah.
Here I am on the stage. Yeah, I was a bard.
But I guess applying for NIDA, right, you're kind of thinking I'm going to be, you may be thinking I'm going to be an actor. You know, an actor is often a role where you are performing someone else's work. You're not necessarily the writer of the words you're speaking. So to make that transition from being someone who thinks of themselves as a vessel for someone else's ideas or stories to being a storyteller yourself. So was that maybe partly why NIDA wasn't, you know, a great fit for you? Was you realising, you know what, actually I need to tell the stories, not just perform them?
Yeah, I think that the freedom, you know, I think there's a lot of freedom in being a writer, whatever you write, in that you get to sort of set the pace. And what I love about music is, you know, you don't have to wait for a phone call. You don't have to wait for someone to audition you or offer you a role. It's like, go and make a record, you know, go and put a band together, go play down the corner pub. Like there's a lot more access into this industry. I mean, there's still gatekeepers, but there's more sort of grassroots access. I found the theatre world and the acting world in general, I just couldn't quite work out how I was going to make that happen. And so I think, for me to move into songwriting and that sort of DIY spirit really suited my character. And I mean, you know, telling your own stories is both daunting, but also really pleasing. Like, I don't know how you feel, Alice, but Alice played me this song on the weekend. We were out in Point Lonsdale, and I think it's the best song you've ever written. Like, it was incredible. It was like, you know, those moments where someone goes, oh, I've got a song, and then they play it, and sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, that was great. And then sometimes you're like, I would be so proud to have written that song. It was so amazing. Like, lyrically, the imagery, it was restrained but really revealing. It was kind of like, it was very self-aware without being like it was vulnerable but also self-aware. And, I just think that there's a lot that you have to go through to come to a point where you're willing to be seen. And I think those are the best songwriters. And I think they're the ones that we're drawn to, are the ones that are like, you know what, I'm just going to tell the truth and you may or may not like it. And that's what I'm drawn to, is like when I'm like, oh my God, you said that in a song.
I think we'll talk more about this because we'll get into how the two of you have been collaborating, but I think also sometimes you need someone else to listen to your song and go, this is amazing. What you've done here is so wonderful. Because it's not even a confidence thing. I think it's a very human thing. As a songwriter, you're not often listening back to your own songs going, this is one of the most important songs of all time. You know, like you might have a borderline personality disorder if that's how you're reacting to your own music, right? So it actually becomes a valuable role of the collaborator and the producer to kind of, it's not just a confidence boost, it's actually just recognizing like, no, this has value in the world, this story, keep going with it. Alice, I want to quote to you a song, which I have not heard this song, but it sounds really good to me. I want to wear no shoes to a furniture store.
Oh my God.
And tell the sales accountant that he won a free cat.
Where did you find that? That's so funny.
Now, that's an Alice Skye original.
Oh my God.
I want to wear no shoes to a furniture store and tell the sales accountant that he won a free cat. Was that the first song you ever wrote? And can you please explain what this song was about and how old were you?
Okay. I was about maybe 12 or 13, and it was like, what year would that have been? I feel like it was like that, like maybe 2007, 2008, where like whimsical indie music was really big.
Right.
I don't know. Just
like what kind of records?
Oh, I can't really think of things off the top of my head.
Whimsical indie.
You know, like Jens Lekman and like...
Yes.
I don't know, like cute, ironic stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Songs
Singing
about cats
like
and furniture.
cardigans.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, bikes and stuff. So that's kind of where my head was at. This song This song was called Free Willy.
I love it already.
And I wrote it because I thought that we got given too much homework in year 7.
Yeah, man.
And the chorus was like, there's no free will in the classroom, no free will at home, no free will in the sky or on the moon, no free will at all.
Protest.
Now, actually, I mean, Free Willy as a name for a song, you know, potentially you could work on that, but at 12, that's pretty rad for that, to be honest, you know.
But yeah, I don't know. There was just lots of those.
I bet.
I want to wear no shoes to a furniture store moments. Yeah.
This is a thing we don't always talk about, but I think if you're a songwriter or an artist of any kind, you know that there's hundreds of songs and sketches and ideas and stuff that you have in those years before you emerge. For most people, like there is that rare case of someone who just sits in front of a piano and bang, they've instantly written some classic hit. But, you know, it's a very unlikely case. For the overwhelming majority of working artists and songwriters, there's this long run up before you are public, you know, before you're sharing stuff.
Thankfully.
So, I mean, it's a bit, you know, this is a whole other conversation really, but things are maybe changing a little bit now. There is a bit more pressure to kind of get right in there and be very public right from the start, get your stuff straight up on these platforms as soon as you start mucking around. So, Alice, did you sort of, were those songs private for you, you know?
Well, sharing music wasn't like a plan that I made. I loved, and I still do, I love writing short stories or poems, and I loved playing piano, and the two were very separate for a long time. And then I think I quit piano lessons because I wasn't doing very well at the homework aspect, and I still loved playing it though, so a way of keeping on doing that was putting some of the short stories or poems with music, and I think like a bit of a coping mechanism as well. Things are pretty turbulent around me, so it was like a nice thing to do for myself. And yeah, I didn't expect to share them. And then my sister showed me this songwriting competition that Karma were running, which is Aboriginal broadcasting organisation in Alice Springs, and they were looking for female Aboriginal songwriters. And I hadn't recorded anything at that point. I just did a voice memo on my phone and then chucked heaps of reverb on it and sent that off. And was really lucky to hear back and go up to Alice Springs and see the inside of a recording studio and record a single there. And then that's kind of how it happened. And I kind of did feel like I was rushing into it, putting stuff out there maybe before it was great. But I don't know, I think it was good for me to just throw myself in the deep end and see what happened.
And in that really early stage of you probably weren't thinking of it like this, or maybe you were, but your early stages as a songwriter, even before that moment, submitting your song to that competition, was part of your process to learn songs from others and study other people's songs? Like you mentioned Missy Higgins and Regina Spektor and you know, there's artists I think I've heard you talk about Ben Folds and Laura Marling, all these wonderful artists over the years that I'm sure you continue to take influence from. But back at that point, when you were sort of just starting out, discovering your voice and your instrument, were you learning those songs and picking them apart at all? I
think unconsciously I was doing that. Yeah. As a kid, I loved the CD booklet. I would just read through those, or I would even just look lyrics up on the internet and print them out, and they would be stuck on my wall, and I just was obsessed with lyrics. And yeah, I just loved people that wrote these things. I was how did they think of that? And I just would become obsessed with that sort of stuff from pretty young, because I just loved that people could communicate their feelings through songs, I think, better than I observed people communicating them in conversation. And I just thought that was amazing. And yeah, I guess I was studying it a bit in a way.
Yeah. What about you, Jen? No two artists are the same. Some artists just sort of soak up their influences by osmosis, just listening a lot. And then some really do study. They really try and draw out the threads and the trends and analyse the chords and the words. You know, have you ever been in one or the other camp?
I've never, really got into sort of thinking about sound or production or what's hot right now, or had my own studio or any of that kind of stuff. Like, it's never, I really respect people who go all in to that. But it's never, I've always been like, I don't have time. I need to be writing songs. And I think the most important aspect of songwriting for me, and, even though melody is what, it captures all of us straight away, and there's songs that I do not know the lyrics to that I love, lyric writing is the most important thing to me. And I think it's because that is my connection, and if I'm not feeling connected and invested in the song that I'm singing, how am I going to do it again and again and again and again, playing these songs live for people? And that's something that I've really discovered, is like, having written a few songs over the years, the songs that I play again and again are the ones that I feel most connected to lyrically. And I think because of that connection, they do their magic, And I think the magic of being a songwriter and performer, which we both are, is having that relationship and seeing songs land and seeing people lean in to what it is that you're talking about. And I think, where I spend the most time when I'm writing new songs is I will go and look at people's lyrics and just read them on genius.com or whatever. And I just read people's lyrics and I read poetry and I do a lot of reading rather than listening, because I have a real tendency, I'm quite a sponge, and I'll go and write someone's song for them again. We're like, oh, I just wrote your song for you, thinking it was mine. And I've done that a few times where I'm like, that sounds exactly like Tim's song, which has already been released and I don't need to write it for him again. To sort of avoid that trap, I tend not to listen to too much music when I'm writing and really spend my time reading lyric, because, I think there are songwriters who are incredible guitarists and, they're into all of these crazy scales that you can play on your guitar, and they're deep guitar nerds, or, everyone comes from a different place. But I think for me, I've always been a lyricist first and a musician second. Yeah.
Well, let's get into the nuts and bolts. That leads to a very obvious question, which is, do the lyrics always come before the song? Are you more likely to sit and write out a story you want to tell and then try and fit it into a melody or a piece of music?
No. And the reason for that is that I don't believe that I have the musical flexibility to be able to write a story and then go, and now I'm going to be able to fit this to this exact kind of music. I can now arrange and create this work around this lyric. I think the difference between a poem and a song is that a song doesn't allow you to get away with anything. It's there. It's this is the rhythm, this is the structure, this is where it has to rhyme if it's going to feel good. No, you can't have that many words in that sentence. It's going to have to be 5 words. And this is where the melody goes. It's it's prescriptive. When you come up with a melody and a song idea, it's saying you were going to have to conform to me. And that's there's a real discipline. And I'd never really realised that. I was just doing that naturally. But now I see it as songwriting is a discipline, and the melody will make you go in a certain direction. And there's a lot of compromise as a songwriter, because you might be like, oh my God, this is such a great idea and I want to say it this way. But actually, the song's not going to allow that. It's going to make me have to go this way. And then it's kind of trying to find your way through it lyrically where it flows but still says what it is that you want to say. Yeah. So songwriting is like hard.
There's our title for this talk today. Songwriting's hard.
It's hard.
It is.
You doubt yourself all the time. And you have like, I'm in the middle of writing a record at the moment. And there are just days where I look at a song and go, that is crap. Like, what are you even thinking? And then 3 days later I'll be like, that's great.
I'm amazing.
It's just so like emotionally, like you've got to be really careful not to throw things away too soon, you know.
Alice, what about you? Like when you sit down to write a song, and this might have changed over the years, but do you generally have a place that you're starting? Are you starting at the piano? Are you feeling out a chord first, or is it a melody, a fragment of a melody? What tends to come first for you?
I don't often sit down and say, I'm going to try and write a song. I feel like it's usually pretty immediate, or something's really bugging me and I need to put it somewhere, or words are in my head and then I get kind of fixated on it, and then I might go and sit at the piano and try and put them out of my head and into a song, because I find that helpful.
So you're kind of waiting for that spark a little bit. And when that happens, it's about recognising it and going, okay, I need to get to a place where I can capture this now.
Yeah. Sometimes I just get melodies stuck in my head, and especially when I'm in like it often happens, I feel like I'm better at writing things when I'm like in the middle of other stuff happening, because I mostly stay inside my head even when I'm out and about. So I'll just like sing into my voice memos on my phone, and then I'll take that home. It's happened to me at like the hairdressers, like getting my hair washed in the basin, and I was just like singing into my phone like that, and then I'll go home and try and figure it out. But I love writing a lot. So I have places I can go to pull stuff out of. So sometimes they come together from different stories, or sometimes it's very immediate and it's happening, and I love that feeling. But if I sit down to write stuff, sometimes it's just, I think it's like songwriting can be like super frustrating until it's not. It's like so annoying, and then then you start getting somewhere and it feels really good, and I just love that feeling. When I'm in that, I realise how much I love songwriting, and they're the best moments, I think, when you've like just started, like you said, like you're finding your way through the song, and that's my favourite part.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like slightly different approaches. You know, Jen, you were saying even just this morning, because we're doing it in the morning here in St Kilda, the Espy. But you said even this morning you got up early and you had a songwriting session, even just a half hour, an hour, and then you're pretty disciplined about doing that.
Yeah.
Have you always been that way, or is this more something you've learned? Because you've been at songwriting for a long time now.
Yeah, no, and I think like probably the first sort of 5 years of songwriting was like I had to do it. You know, like I had to sit down and write as a way of sort of dealing with life, I think. And it was a real release, and it was a way of, I mean, a lot of them were love songs, you know, like unabashed, unashamed love songs, unrequited love. I mean, just endless, you know, the amount of songs you can get out of unrequited love, I mean, really. And then sort of as I've grown older, I've heard older sort of songwriters say this as well, is like that doesn't unfortunately keep you going. You know, there's a point where you kind of go, I'm going to have to sit down and apply myself, you know, not for everyone, but certainly for me. And what I have found really good, because you get stale, and I think the other thing that, you know, if you're a songwriter that's writing on a piano or a guitar, is you go to the same chords. It's like this kind of, sense memory that's in our bodies, and, you know, they feel comfortable, and that's where I go. And I saw that starting to happen with my songwriting, and I was like, I need to do something to make sure that I don't keep writing songs that sound the same. And so I started to play around with tunings. And I'd say over the last 10 years, like tunings have really helped me to lose myself on the fretboard, so that where I would not, like, so I don't know where I'm going. And I have to find things in that tuning that sound good, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so it kind of pulls my songwriting into different directions, different melodies, different song structures, rhythms, because I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I've never known what I'm doing, but once my body knew what it was doing, I had to do. Oh my God, where am I going? But anyway, you know what I mean? Like, I think what I'm trying to say is, if you're a songwriter, you're watching this, it is really important to keep challenging yourself so that you don't get bored and stop doing it. Because I think had I not done that, I reckon I would have gone, songwriting's really boring, I'm going to do something else. And it's kept me sort of on my toes. And, I have to apply myself to it. And really, like, the other thing I've discovered about songwriting is, like, I never know what I'm doing. It is like, if you want a career that is totally unknown, if you're going to take risks as a songwriter, which I think most people watching this would like to think they were that songwriter, it is the great unknown. And that is equal part terrifying. I feel lost all the time. I lose faith in myself all the time. But I also think that were it not like that, I would be bored.
For sure.
And that's why I keep going back to do it, is like, because there's something that's always just out of reach.
And the reward is so nice, like, if you get something out of it. I'm definitely finding, like, I think after 2020 and, like, staying at home, and like I was saying, songs would usually happen when I was, like, in the middle of heaps of stuff. That obviously wasn't happening in 2020. So I was trying to, and because you talked about how you just, put aside time just to write stuff, and not being too attached to what you write either, because it doesn't have to be perfect immediately, which is sometimes something I can't wrap my head around, is if something isn't perfect the first time I try it. So I've been trying to sit down and do stuff more. And the song that you were talking about before, I wrote on guitar, which I don't play. But the challenge, I think a challenge is really good. Or just changing something about how you approach things can be super helpful.
Yeah, I think it's about challenging yourself, but I know for me, sometimes it's also about trying to remember why I started mucking around with music in the first place, which can be sometimes a childlike naivety and a sense of exploration, which applies to all music makers, whether you're a songwriter or making sounds or you're a guitarist or a lot of the time, not all the time, a lot of the time musicians or people who end up becoming artists and musicians, their initial relationship with music is one of play. And so when you do feel maybe you're getting a bit stale, you're in the same habits, that can have its own kind of comfort and familiarity, and sometimes you can achieve really great things because you've really burrowed down on that one thing. But you can lose sight of that sense of play, which I think is the thing that can keep you going when there are so many challenges. Being an artist, trying to operate in music, in the music industry, trying to hold on to that sense of play can give you that inner energy that can keep you going. You know?
Absolutely.
So, you mentioned, like, writing a song and maybe it doesn't have to be the greatest thing. You know, it's not every song you sit down and write is going to just instantly be amazing. What do you guys like at finishing songs or developing songs? Do you tend to kind of write something and then look at it and go, this is just not going to happen, and file it away? Or do you keep going back trying to finesse it? What's your general process there?
I don't know. Some songs I just feel like I'm pushing them and it's really hard. And I usually stop if it's starting to feel too, I don't know.
It's a tricky question. How do you know when to keep going with a song and when to let it go?
I don't know. I just, you were humming a song that you were writing this morning. Like, that's usually, like, if I've got a feeling like that, I will stay, and it's unfinished, I'll stay with it. If there's an element of it that I'm like, this could be something potentially. But But sometimes I have half songs that end up becoming one song together as well. I don't know. I try not to stay with things for too long and push them for too long because I can't. I get frustrated. So I have to step away. But that's like also another amazing part about having like a safe like group of people that you can show your songs as well. And that wasn't something that I had when I first started songwriting. I would be way too embarrassed to show somebody an unfinished song. Like I wouldn't even dream of it. But sometimes that can be helpful if you don't know if you should keep going with it or if you should ditch it.
Yeah, I think you're right, that feeling, you know, like if you want to keep working on the song and singing it, or there's like, if it hooks you in, I've learnt to trust that there's probably going to be other people who have the same response. And really just kind of going with that a lot more as like, if I like this, I'm going to trust that my taste is good enough and that there's going to be at least some people out there who feel the same way and want to listen to it.
Just one.
Yeah. It may not be like, you know, the whole world, but yeah, trusting that part of you that wants to return to the song and sing it. And I think, again, like, you know, we can all think of songs that we've written in our careers, however long or short, and that you still want to sing, you know, that you still find something in. And they're, you know, few and far between. Like I wouldn't write a whole album of songs that I might play one song from my first album now if you were to, you know, give me a set list.
There's someone out there who loves that album. Who's
Yes, just waiting.
Who's watching this going, I knew it.
But I'm very much a songwriter that is fairly economical. Like I won't stay with an idea and keep working on it unless I think there's something there. So generally the songs that I bring to the album are the songs that I've been working on, full stop. You know, there'll be like people like, oh, I've written 50 songs and I'm just going to choose the best 10. I'm like, wow. You know, like I'd be there for 20 years if you said write 50 songs and bring me your best 10, you know.
Yeah. Well, they're both valid, you know. It's one of those things. It's like everyone's got their process and what works for them. So part of this is just about, you know, figuring out what sort of works for you.
Yeah.
That idea of having that safe space where you've got people who you trust that you can share them a piece of music and their critical feedback is going to be something that you will process and that you value, and that just emotionally you feel comfortable sharing something that's maybe rough around the edges or you're not too sure about. Sometimes I think about, there are many people, I think, and there'll be people watching this who don't have those people, haven't found that group, don't have a group necessarily, they're just sort of maybe feeling isolated. Have you guys ever thought about, are there other ways that you can get that sense, or is it really about you need to get out into the world and find some human beings that you can trust and that you can be friends with and form that relationship with? Because I've seen so many people who, you know, maybe their entry into music gets halted because they just never quite find that person or those people. You know?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, for me it worked that way. It didn't happen. I don't think I had like that kind of until we worked together on the album. I mean, I play music when we play live shows and everything with twin brothers that I've known my whole life. So that was something I always had with me from the beginning of playing music. And that was really important to me. I'm just I don't know, I'm like to be secretive or something, and I just need to be as well. And I don't find it easy to do those kinds of things. So having the twins around me was really a big, like, vital part of the process, because they know me, they know where I come from, and they also care about that too, and it's important to them. So when because we didn't do the first album together, I did that by myself up in Alice Springs. So then this second album that we've worked on, I really wanted the room to still feel that way, like the way that I do with the twins. And I'd met Jen a couple of times and just loved the way that you spoke about songwriting and your approach. And I just thought that would, add to the safe space in the room. And I really require that when songwriting and doing those sorts of things. So I think, if you're looking for that, I think it can happen naturally, but maybe not instantly. But I think that's the beautiful thing about playing music and getting out there is you do kind of slowly find your people, and it's so helpful too. I just think, might not happen straight away. Definitely took me a minute.
I think sometimes that person can be a friend as well, not even necessarily a musician. If it's someone that just really cares about you and has shown an interest in your work and what you're working on, what you're fiddling around with. Sometimes even just playing a piece of music that you're working on to someone who maybe doesn't have the skills to even critically talk about it, and even if you don't expect feedback from them, that actually all you want is to be heard by a person. It's funny how even just that act can sometimes make you feel a lot less alone as a songwriter or as a music creator, to just kind of go, hey, can I just show you this thing I'm making? And you don't have to say anything about it. I think 9 times out of 10, if it's your friend, they're going to go, this is awesome, and and it's okay to need that as part of your process, to need someone to tell you, hey, this is good, keep going.
I think it's so important, and you're not often giving yourself that in your head. So if you can find someone else that will just give you that, it's nice.
I wanted to talk a bit about how mood and the creative process intersect, because we're all human beings and all artists are human beings. Maybe there's some songwriters that are kind of mechanical machines and that's its own skill set. But for so many musicians and songwriters, your relationship with your mood, how the creative process intersects with that is so complicated. But I wanted to talk about it because, Alice, it's a part of your songwriting. It's embedded in it. Your first album's called Friends with Feelings. That's a song where you're talking about very openly about your feelings and how to process your feelings. And that's a theme that comes up in a lot of your music is you're kind of, in some way, in some songs it feels like you're kind of documenting your own process of handling your feelings and then sharing that with people. So I kind of wanted to ask you both how you feel your mood affects your songwriting. Is it you are relying on feeling a certain way in order to get into a song? Do you write better when you're feeling ecstatic or upset? Or do you need to find, I know there's some writers who need to find equilibrium, no matter how extreme their emotions and their stories might be, they can't actually get it out until they can get themselves back into that centre place. What have some of your experiences been? Maybe Jen, what's your relationship been like over time with your emotions and the actual process of writing?
Yeah, I write very much about my life and my environment and what's going on for me at that time. And, I think the challenge that I always set for myself is tell the truth, just tell the truth. And that's much more interesting, where that can take you. I used to think that I had to feel something when I was writing, I had to feel emotions for it to be a good song. And I don't necessarily feel big emotions when I'm writing songs. Like I said earlier, they were a real release. But that isn't to say that they aren't, that they aren't full of feeling. But I think a little bit like Alice, and maybe something that we do share in common is maybe talking about what we don't want people to see, or the vulnerability. I just even a title like Friends with Feelings I love, because it's is that they're friends with feelings, or is Alice becoming friends with her feelings, or there's layers and dimensions, and I think there is that complexity, that emotional complexity, and that I like to sort of delve deeper into life purpose and what are we doing here, and what am I learning from this experience, and what is being shown to me. And as I grow older, and I hope somewhat wiser, I think my songs have become a deeper expression of my authentic, true self.
Let's talk a little bit about the two of you working together, because Alice, you know, you've had the twins in your life, making music with them. You've had people come in and out, but this sort of feels like maybe a deeper collaboration than you've had in the past to work on this new record so closely with Jen. Awkward question, but you know, Jen is an incredible songwriter.
I'm very aware.
That first, I'm sure you would have been so excited to learn from her, but that first day where you're like, I'm here to work on this music with Jen, like, were you intimidated? How did you process that feeling of working with someone who maybe feels like they're a couple of steps ahead with, you know, what they're doing?
I think we maybe met properly on a panel about songwriting. Is that right? But I can't remember how much earlier than that I'd seen you do a keynote speech at like Darebin Music Festival. And I just was like, I think I cried. Like, I don't know, I think I had maybe been like maybe 3 years into playing music in the industry, and like, it's overwhelming, and I didn't know I met everybody while I was doing it, so I didn't previously know people from the industry, so I was really just figuring everything out as I was going, and I think it can be really daunting for everyone, but especially if you're not white or, you know, you're a First Nations person, and any other community that you might come from, and you just kind of covered all these things that were really on my mind, and I was like, wow. And I'd obviously heard your music, but then I, like, after that keynote speech, really delved through it, and I was just like, wow, these songs are amazing. And then we met properly, and I don't know,
You were super brave. Like, we did that panel, and that's when I finally kind of met you and chatted to you properly. And then you said, oh, can I get your number? Would love to catch up. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, sure. And then you called up and was like, oh, you know, I was like wondering if we could just catch up. And you came over to my place, and I was wearing my giraffe onesie because that's what I wear.
I was very intimidated, but yeah, I knocked on Jen's door at her house, and she answered it in this like giraffe onesie, and I was like, here's someone I just respect so much as a musician and songwriter. So that really helped a little bit with the intimidation.
But you just came over to my house and was like, would you, you know, produce my album or help me?
I don't think I asked.
Help me?
I didn't ask in real life. I think we hung out and had...
did we? Okay.
Yeah. We hung out and just talked about random stuff, and then I was talking to my friends, and I was like, do you think I can ask? Because I signed with Bad Apples, and they were like, you know, think about who you might want to produce your album. And after your keynote speech, I was like, Jen Cloher, I feel like that would be amazing. I really wanted another songwriter to produce it. And
why was that, do you think?
I think because that's the most important part to me. Like you were saying, is the lyrics. Like, that's my favourite part. So I wanted someone else that I think also felt the same, and also someone that I could learn from that had an approach to the industry that I really admired, because I think people can come into the industry from all sorts of different angles, and I really wanted someone that I felt I was on the same kind of, you know, I thought I could learn lots about songwriting and also just like how to exist in this industry. And yeah, then we met, and I was like, I was talking to my friends and my manager, and I was like, do you think I can ask? I don't know how to ask. And then I was like drafting emails, and I was like, I don't want to impose. I don't want to make someone feel like they have to do something. But you said yes, and then, I don't know, it just kind of, we spent some time hanging out before we got into the studio. So I think by the time we got into the studio, it was... I was just super excited and like a little bit scared, because working on albums is scary, I think. You never know what's going to happen.
Well, I was really honoured, because no one had ever asked me to produce their work before. And I had a bit of a moment of like, oh, I don't know if I have that skill set. And then I thought, well, I've produced all of my own records, you know, with other musicians by my side. And I agree, like the best collaborations I find are with other songwriters, even if they have, you know, more technical skills and can engineer as well. I really love working with other songwriters. They really get it. And even in my band, you know, I like to work with people who really understand the importance of the song. You know, they come from that songwriting perspective. And we ended up working with Nick Huggins, engineering, and I'd made a record with Nick.
The best.
He's so great. I'd made a record with Nick a few years back and just felt like he would be a good match with, you know, what Alice was doing. And
He's also a great
he's a songwriter. Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's the whole thing, is like being in a studio and it was like, I mean, when you say studio, it was like sitting in his lounge room, because he's got this really, well, he did have this really cute little bungalow that he records in out in Point Lonsdale, and you can go for swims, and it's just so chill. Such a lovely way to make a record. And I feel like there was a really deep level of relaxation. But yeah, I guess, like, I think it was really brave. Like, actually, now that you say it, I approached Beck Runger to produce my first album, and it didn't end up happening, but we did do a session together, and she sang some BVs on that song and, you know, just helped me. And but I remember her saying to me, find your comrades, and it really stuck with me. And I love what Alice just said about, like, finding people with similar values, you know, people who see things in a similar way and understand where you're coming from. I hadn't thought of that, but it's actually really important, you know, that you're working with people that are on the same page. Yeah.
Not just in songwriting, but anything to do with music, really. It's just...
life.
And life.
Yeah.
It's a really simple lesson to learn, but yeah, and it's easy to forget. Good to be reminded of.
Yeah.
Well, Alice, Jen, thank you so much. This has been so good. I've learned a lot, but I'm sure anyone watching this has as well. So can't wait for your record to come out, Alice. I know it's been a bit coming, so
Yes.
yeah. And Jen, you're working on a new record at the moment.
Yeah.
You're writing songs for it.
Yeah, I'm hoping to go home to Aotearoa and make my 5th album there.
Fantastic.
And then tour New Zealand with Alice.
Yeah, we've got 2022
2022.
plans.
Nice. Everybody's got like 2025 plans, which is great. I love that. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.